When Scott Hall strolled into a WCW ring on May 27, 1996, nobody could have predicted what would come next. 2 weeks later, Kevin Nash joined him. Then, at Bash at the Beach 1996, Hulk Hogan dropped multiple leg drops on Randy Savage, and the New World Order was born. The nWo changed professional wrestling forever. It turned WCW from a distant second place into the hottest promotion on the planet. It sparked the Monday Night Wars. It made wrestling cool again. And it attracted some of the biggest names in sports entertainment under its black and white banner. But here's the thing about the New World Order. Not all members were created equal. For every Hollywood Hogan or Scott Hall, there was a Vincent or another forgettable B-level member. For every legendary moment, there was someone standing awkwardly in the background, wondering why they were even there. The group became so bloated that Eric Bischoff himself admitted he envisioned the nWo as its own wrestling promotion, which explains why everyone and their grandmother seemed to join at some point. So today, we're breaking down every member of the New World Order and placing them into 7 distinct tiers based on their performance, their impact, and how much fans actually cared about them. This is the 7 levels of nWo member. Every legendary stable has its dead weight, and the nWo was no exception. These are the members who made you scratch your head and wonder if someone backstage lost a bet. They contributed virtually nothing to the group's success, and in some cases, actively made things worse. With Hulk Hogan heading up the hottest thing in wrestling, it was inevitable that he would get his best mates involved in the action. Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags, collectively known as the Nasty Boys, were longtime Hogan associates, and contracts were negotiated, t-shirts were donned, and then the nWo promptly beat the absolute stuffing out of them. Soon, the Nasties and the Outsiders would tangle, but things went sideways at a house show in Shreveport in early 1997. When Sags thought Hall was shooting on his legitimately injured neck during a chair spot, he attacked Hall for real and knocked out at least one of his teeth. Hall required oral surgery and missed the following Nitro. That was the end of the Nasties in WCW. To be fair, they would have been decent goons for the nWo, unlike some others on this list. But when you're getting into legitimate fights with the top guys in the faction, your membership is going to be short-lived. The former Virgil came to WCW to continue his greatest role of being the $1 Million Man's gormless lackey, now named Vincent after one Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Get it? Because WCW was subtle like that. As the nWo's head of security, Vincent joined the group on September 23, 1996, as the 7th official member. He did very little aside from taking loss after loss, so the others didn't have to do the job, brother. Vincent did manage a win over the Giant, though, by disqualification in an 8-on-1 handicap match with the rest of the nWo. Fair play to Vincent for getting paid an absolute wedge to stare at the ceiling and hold Hogan's title. That sort of money can buy you a lot of meat sauce, even if it can't get your dignity back. After several floundering characters in WCW, Big Bubba left the Dungeon of Doom to join the nWo in December 1996. However, his inclusion was the first sign that things weren't properly being thought through when it came to the stable, as Bubba had been largely irrelevant since leaving WWE 3 years prior. Bubba's tenure in the black and white wasn't long. He was turfed out by WCW Commissioner J.J. Dillon in early 1997, citing contractual obligations. Basically, it was the equivalent of being told by your mom to stop hanging around with the hard kids and come home for dinner. When even WCW's authority figures think you don't belong in the nWo, you know you're in trouble. Michael Wall Street was invited into the nWo by former WWE tag partner, the $1 Million Man. And like several others on this tier, he felt like a square peg in a round hole. Now, Mike Rotunda was a great worker, but he was never charismatic enough to be in the nWo. In kayfabe, the idea of this ruthless gang thriving on anarchy and chaos, having an accountant in their ranks, was a bit far-fetched. Nothing says dangerous biker gang quite like a guy who can help you with your tax returns. Like Big Bubba before him, J.J. Dillon told Wall Street to stop being silly and come back to WCW, citing contractual obligations. Wall Street just shrugged his shoulders and went to Japan. At least he probably filed his travel expenses correctly. These members weren't completely useless. They served a purpose, even if that purpose was mostly standing in the background looking vaguely threatening, or occasionally taking a beating on behalf of the main guys. They were bodies in the frame, and sometimes that's all you need. Miss Elizabeth is an icon, but truth be told, she should have never been a heel. Yet she was, first turning on Randy Savage and aligning with the Four Horsemen, and later joining the nWo, when Savage also donned the black and white. The pair were reunited, with Elizabeth joining in the shenanigans and the spray painting and all that, but she never looked completely comfortable. It did create a nice dynamic when Savage had his incredible feud with DDP, with Elizabeth and Kimberly in their respective corners, but lovely Liz always felt like a square peg in a round hole. She was too inherently likable to be a convincing villain, and watching her try to act evil was like watching your favorite teacher try to be strict. You just didn't buy it. One of the founding member of nWo Japan, Tenzan made a handful of appearances for WCW during the nWo's heyday, but failed to wrestle a single match in WCW until after the nWo split in 1998. He did appear from time to time, though, and his big mask made him look a bit like one of the big bad Beetleborgs, which was something, I suppose. Over in New Japan, Tenzan was a vital cog in the nWo Japan machine and could routinely be found kicking the absolute stuffing out of anyone who dared cross them. It's a shame WCW never utilized him properly because the guy could go in the ring, but that's WCW for you, importing talent and then forgetting they exist. Leaving WWE after the lousy Gang Wars angle as part of the DOA, Brian Crush Adams made his way to WCW, attacked Bret Hart, and joined the nWo as a big hulking muscle in the order there to do big hulking muscle things. The problem was, Adams was instantly surplus to requirements. The group already boasted Scott Norton, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and was soon to induct everyone's favorite lunatic, Scott Steiner. When you've got that much beef on the roster, another slab of muscle is just redundant. Adams proceeded to do very little until joining nWo Hollywood in the Big Split, then being relegated to the terrible B team when the nWo became whole again. Things got worse when Adams became the Kiss Demon in 1999 before saying sod this and teaming with Brian Clark as Chronic in 2000. Big Brian did get a WCW World Heavyweight Championship shot whilst in the nWo, but was easily swept aside by Goldberg. At least he got the payday. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Ed Leslie banking another inflated paycheck and claiming the 50th gimmick of his career. To be fair to the former Beefcake, he was almost unrecognizable as the Disciple and looked, dare I say it, almost cool, hanging about quietly with the World Heavyweight title belt draped over his shoulder. In the grand scheme of things, the Disciple is little more than an interesting footnote in the Booty Man's career. His debut was very subdued, solemnly standing in the background as the nWo beat down Sting and Randy Savage, and he did nothing but join in some beatdowns and wrestle the occasional match before the Ultimate Warrior kidnapped him, brainwashed him, and nonsensically made him the second member of the One Warrior Nation. Of all the nWo members you would pick to be on your side in a war against them, the Disciple would be close to the bottom. But hey, at least he looked the part. Now we're getting into members who actually contributed something meaningful to the nWo's success. They might not have been main eventers, but they filled important roles and helped make the faction feel like a legitimate threat. These are the guys who did their jobs well, even if those jobs weren't glamorous. Formerly known as Rad Radford in WWE, and by his given name in ECW, Louis Spiccoli rocked up to WC in late 1997 and went straight under the wing of real-life pal Scott Hall. Spiccoli and Hall would feud with Larry Zbyszko, with Spicoli annoying the living legend week in and week out, even doing guest stints on commentary that were as witty as they were controversial. Spicoli had genuine charisma and could work. He felt like a guy on the rise, someone who could have eventually become a significant player in the nWo hierarchy. Tragically, Spicoli was found dead on February 15, 1998, just 1 week before his scheduled match with Zbyszko at Super Brawl 8. He had turned 27 just 5 days earlier. Wrestling lost a talent with enormous potential, and the nWo lost a member who genuinely seemed to understand the assignment. Everyone loves to hate a corrupt referee. The Hebners, Dangerous Danny Davis, Charles Robinson, but possibly the most notorious of them all was the nWo's personal referee, Nick Patrick. Patrick always seemed to be handling nWo matches, turning a blind eye to blatant rule-breaking, dishing out counts that were slightly too fast, and was officially revealed to be on the nWo payroll. He officiated every single match at the notorious nWo sold-out pay-per-view on January 25, 1997, complete with a rad backwards cap, with shenanigans dialed up to the max, including refusing to count a pinfall for the Giant during his World Heavyweight Championship match against Hollywood Hogan. Patrick would later have a change of heart and leave the nWo after trying to stop Kevin Nash from battering Rick Steiner at Spring Stampede 1997. Unfortunately for Patrick, Big Kev just creamed him instead. Sometimes doing the right thing gets you powerbombed. The fourth member of the nWo, the $1 Million Man, continued his WWE gimmick of being dead rich and was revealed as the New World Order's official benefactor on August 26, 1996, approximately 7 weeks after the group's formation. Kayfabe-wise, the move made a lot of sense. Ted was a former WWE star, and it was nice to explain how 3 men could afford airtime, advertising time, and merchandise while invading a multi-million-dollar organization. Ted is also one of the greatest heels of all time, and his association with the nWo helped them more than it hindered them. Unfortunately for Ted, his run was made redundant with the revelation that Eric Bischoff was running the nWo from the inside, and his skills on the mic and his money were no longer needed. Ted wiped away his tears with a $100 bill and left the nWo and his personal manservant Vincent behind to manage the Steiner brothers instead. Everyone's got a price, but apparently the nWo's budget got reallocated. Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, the Common Man, one of the biggest babyfaces in pro wrestling history. He joined the nWo, serving primarily as the outsider's manager. It was an odd pairing, as Hall and Nash didn't need anyone to do their talking, and Hall already had Louis Spicoli at his side. Dusty followed Hall to Hollywood when the nWo split in two and lasted a few months before becoming the Dream again. Sometimes the best thing about a shock turn is the turn itself, and Dusty's nWo run was exactly that, a shock that never quite found its footing. Rick Rude shocked the world by appearing live on WCW Nitro and taped on WWE Raw on the same night when he debuted on November 17, 1997, just 8 days after the Montreal Screwjob. It was the only time in the Monday Night Wars that a wrestler appeared on both competing shows simultaneously, and it was a genuine holy moment for fans watching. After trashing WWE on the microphone in the wake of Montreal, Rude joined the nWo, serving as good buddy Curt Hennig's manager, and that was about it, really. WCW should have done more with Rude in this role. Despite sticking with Hennig through nWo to the Wolfpack and to nWo Hollywood, the Ravishing One did little more than look tough and wield a glorious mustache. Looking tough, glorious mustache, rock-solid abs. Rude had all the tools and WCW had all the opportunity. The fact that they squandered it is peak WCW mismanagement. These members weren't just filling space. They were genuinely dangerous, talented performers who elevated the nWo's credibility as a dominant force. When these guys were involved, you knew something significant was happening. They might not have been the faces of the faction, but they were essential to its success. If wrestling in 1997 needed a clear sign to prove that it was must-see television, it achieved it when Chicago Bulls bad boy Dennis Rodman joined the nWo. The Worm first appeared on March 10, 1997, and his inclusion in the group was headline-making news, with Rodman's antics on and off the court attracting a huge media circus no matter what he did or where he went. Plus, let's not beat around the bush. Rodman was certified cool and fit the fresh nWo like a glove. His whole aesthetic, the hair, the tattoos, the attitude, it all screamed nWo. While his in-ring prowess was lacking, he proved to be the difference maker on several occasions, joining in with beatdowns and spray paint attacks. Rodman would later join nWo Hollywood and defeated Karl Malone and DDP at Bash at the Beach 1998, all while winning back-to-back NBA championships with the Bulls in 1996, 1997, and 1998. The man was simultaneously one of the best basketball players on the planet and a member of wrestling's hottest faction. That's crossover appeal you simply cannot manufacture. Scott Norton. Big beefy arm wrestling legend Scott Flash. Norton has one of the most underrated nWo tenures of all its members. Joining in 1997, Norton was soon teamed up with loudmouthed upstart Buff Bagwell as the terribly named Vicious and Delicious, with the two engaging in a decent feud with the Steiner brothers. Norton was pulling double duty with New Japan and became a cornerstone of nWo Japan when he became the Gaijin ace of the company. The man was criminally underused by WCW, doing little more than standing there, basically being absolutely massive. When you're that intimidating, sometimes that's all you need to do. After the nWo split in 1998, Norton would spend more time in New Japan, shockingly winning the IWGP Heavyweight Championship on September 23, 1998, defeating Yuji Nagata for the vacant title. He held it for 103 days, but of course it was barely mentioned on WCW TV because you couldn't take the shine off of Hollywood Hogan, brother. Norton deserved better from WCW, but at least Japan appreciated him. The Great Muta. One of the greatest Japanese wrestlers ever, the Great Muta had a storied run in WCW in the 80s and 90s, feuding with the likes of Sting and Lex Luger, and holding the WCW TV title for 121 days. With WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's relationship continuing into the late 90s, Muta would pop up sporadically, mainly under his face guise of Keiji Muto, continuing his war with Masahiro Chono and nWo Japan. Over on US soil, however, Muto became corrupted and joined nWo Japan, aligning with Chono to take on the likes of the Steiner brothers and Public Enemy in WCW, whilst reigning as IWGP Tag Team Champions in New Japan Pro Wrestling with Chono. They won those titles on October 19, 1997, and held them for approximately 200 days. As the nWo imploded in America, nWo Japan had a power struggle, with Muta taking the reins from Chono, turning the group face and beating Scott Norton for the IWGP Heavyweight title. Muta brought legitimacy and international prestige to the nWo. When a legend of his caliber joins your faction, it means something. Masahiro Chono. A former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Masahiro Chono was a prominent figure during New Japan and WCW's working relationship in the 90s. In December 1996, Chono revealed himself as a member of the nWo on Nitro and would form nWo Japan in New Japan Pro Wrestling. In WCW, Chono would team with Frenemy and nWo Japan cohort, the Great Muta, in tag action, but his main nWo work was done in New Japan, where Chono basically just kicked a lot of people very hard in the face. Simple, effective, terrifying. Chono brought a different kind of menace to the nWo. He wasn't an old biker, nor was he a wannabe member of the Dog Pound. He was a Yakuza-inspired madman who lusted for power and wanted to break whoever got in his way. Eventually, he would get that power when he won his only IWGP Heavyweight Championship in 1998. Chono proved that the nWo's influence extended far beyond American shores. Fake Sting. When the nWo formed, it sent a wave of paranoia through WCW. Who would join next? Who would dare defect to this ragtag group of wily villains? The entirety of WCW was dumbfounded when perennial hero Sting turned his back on WCW to join the nWo. But it wasn't the real Sting. It was Jeff Farmer, under the face paint. And he fooled everyone hook, line, and stinger, leading the real Sting to go sit in the rafters and listen to the Smiths. This fake Sting, debuting on September 9, 1996, was mainly a fall guy who took beating after beating after beating, usually from the real Sting. But fake Sting did get a significant win. At Fall Brawl 1996 War Games, he made Lex Luger submit to the Scorpion Deathlock, giving the nWo victory. Weirdly, fake Sting actually became a big star in Japan with tag victories over legends like Shinya Hashimoto and Satoshi Kojima. The imposter somehow built a legitimate career off being a knockoff. You've got to respect the hustle. Level 3. The Star Makers Tier. These members didn't just benefit from being in the nWo. They became stars because of it. The black and white transformed them from mid-carders, or promising talents, into legitimate main event players. Their nWo runs defined their careers in ways that would have been impossible otherwise. Buff Bagwell. Marcus Bagwell was a clean-cut American male destined for moderate success in WCW. Then, the nWo offered him a bunch of cash and the opportunity to wear a silly hat. So, on November 25, 1996, he pummeled his tag partner Scotty Riggs on Nitro and renamed himself Buff Bagwell. Buff joining the nWo was seen as a coup for the group, as Bagwell was seen as the future of the company, with his defection viewed as a massive middle finger to WCW. Cocky, loudmouthed, with a face you just wanted to see get slapped, Buff was an effective heel in the nWo. The turn allowed the gifted yet bland Marcus Alexander to really develop his character and skills. Buff teamed with Scott Norton as Vicious and Delicious, and also feuded with WCW legend Lex Luger, defeating the Total Package at Starrcade 1997 with help from Scott Norton. Scarily, Buff's career nearly ended after a botched bulldog from Rick Steiner. But thankfully, he recovered, beat up Rick alongside Scott Steiner, joined nWo Hollywood, and became an even bigger tosser, as if that was possible. The nWo made Buff, and Buff made the nWo more annoying. It was a perfect match. Conan. Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff's vision for the nWo was a grizzled biker gang. Kevin Nash and Scott Halls was a hip-hop-inspired street crew, similar to Death Row Records. When Conan joined, he decided he was definitely more of the latter than the former. The newly dubbed K-Dog added some legitimate cool to the nWo and used his newfound attitude to routinely victimize his former friends in the cruiserweight division, such as beating Rey Mysterio in a Mexican death match at Road Wild 1997. Conan would spend most of his tenure tagging with the likes of Syxx and Buff Bagwell, joining the two and Kevin Nash in victory over the Four Horsemen in War Games at Fall Brawl 1997. K-Dog would also unsuccessfully challenge for the WCW tag titles on several occasions, teaming with Scott Norton and Kevin Nash. Despite his prominence in the group, Conan would ultimately just be another good hand in the nWo, and although massively popular with the fans, he would have to wait until co-founding the Wolfpack to get his time in the sun, lifting WCW's TV title in December 1998 whilst a part of the Black and Red. Arriba la Raza, the Giant. After an unprecedented rookie year that started with a WCW World Heavyweight Championship win in his debut match, the Giant picked up the belt for a second time and became WCW's last great hope when the nWo came to town. After dropping the strap to Hollywood Hogan at Hog Wild 1996, the $1 Million Man threw a fridge full of money at the Giant, and the future Big Show became the group's fifth member and the first to defect from WCW to nWo. This was a huge deal at the time. When a 7-foot-tall monster joins the bad guys, you pay attention. The Giant's inclusion was great while it lasted, with the four main nWo members forming a visually imposing force as they smashed everything in sight into smithereens. But soon, the Giant won the World War III Battle Royal on November 24, 1996, last eliminating Lex Luger for a shot at World Heavyweight Champion Hollywood Hogan. And rather than doing what was good for the nWo, the Giant wanted his shot at Big Goldie. He was beaten down, booted out on December 30th, 1996, only to rejoin a year later and get booted out again before rejoining once more in WWE. And people thought Paul White turning more than a wheel of cheese rolling down a hill was strictly a WWE problem. Curt Hennig. When the former Mr. Perfect rocked up to WCW in mid-1997, he was courted by both the nWo and the Four Horsemen, joining the latter in the wake of Arn Anderson's emotional retirement speech. Heading into Fall Brawl 1997, tensions were high between the Horsemen and the nWo, leading to War Games. Unfortunately, Hennig was jumped before the match, leaving Ric Flair, Chris Benoit, and Steve McMichael to fight the nWo a man down. Hennig eventually turned up, promptly turned on the Horsemen just 3 weeks after joining them, and joined the nWo Bastard. Hennig tasted instant success in the black and white, defeating Diamond Dallas Page for the US Championship the next night on Nitro, while disparaging former pal Ric Flair's legacy. With Rick Rude joining his side, Hennig was the nWo's wrestling machine and routinely beat Ric Flair while showing that he was still one of the greatest natural heels in the game. Imagine our shock then when Hennig and Rude turned face to join the Wolfpack. Alas, it was all a ruse, and seemingly as soon as they were in, they were out again, joining Hollywood Hogan's nWo Hollywood before Hennig later declared war on Master P and the No Limit Soldiers. Wrestling is weird sometimes. Scott Steiner. As the 90s rumbled on, Scott Steiner started to change. First, he grew an evil goatee. Then he cut his mullet off, and his arms tripled in size. Tension started growing between him and brother Rick heading into Super Brawl 8 on February 22, 1998. The Steiners were the reigning WCW Tag Champions and took on the Outsiders, but Scott turned on Rick, never making a single offensive move against Hall or Nash before attacking his brother from behind, giving the Outsiders the tag titles and officially joining the nWo. The next night, superstar Scott Steiner was born, his hair now peroxide blonde, his sanity clearly in tatters. It was the first step towards transforming into the terrifying behemoth known as Big Papa Pump. As part of the nWo, Steiner was a legit threat for the crew, able to suplex and bludgeon practically everyone in WCW. I mean, it's Scott Steiner. The man is a genetic freak, and he's not normal. Scott would feud with Rick and subsequently team with Buff Bagwell while becoming an ever more integral part of the nWo, eventually taking the reins of nWo Hollywood after Hogan retired in late 1998. Scott joining the nWo turned him into a legitimate singles star, and to think if he never turned on Rick, then he may never have spelled disaster for Samoa Joe at Sacrifice. The numbers don't lie. Level 2, the Essential Tier. Without these members, the nWo simply doesn't work. They weren't just important, they were essential. The faction's success hinged on their contributions, whether that was in the ring, on the microphone, or behind the scenes pulling the strings. These are the people who made the nWo mean something. Randy Savage. One of the most enigmatic performers in wrestling history and one of the greatest heels, the wild and unhinged Randy Savage was a pretty good fit for the nWo, looking like he could snap at any minute and beat everyone to a pulp. Savage joined on February 23, 1997, at Super Brawl 7 by attacking Roddy Piper. Savage brought an unpredictable edge to the nWo, even if his joining of the group didn't really make the most sense, considering the nWo targeted Savage repeatedly for a year before he joined. But that's Macho Man, unpredictable, unhinged, and utterly compelling. The highlight of Savage's tenure was his incredible star-making feud with Diamond Dallas Page, with the two going back and forth on WCW TV for approximately 7 to 8 months, turning DDP into a legitimate main event star for the company. That feud was named Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Feud of the Year, and it earned every bit of that recognition. As always with Savage, everything came back to Hogan. and their uneasy alliance carried on in the black and white, with Savage rising into the world title scene once more. Hogan felt threatened, and cracks started to form in the New World Order. After defeating World Heavyweight Champion Sting, with Kevin Nash's help, Savage vowed to topple Hogan, but once again Hollywood would triumph over Macho Man, with Bret Hart's help of all people. An infuriated Savage didn't dig it, and he and Nash formed the nWo Wolfpack. Even within the nWo, Savage was too big a personality to stay contained. Ooh yeah. Eric Bischoff. Long before Mr. McMahon made WWE a living hell for Stone Cold Steve Austin, Eric Bischoff was destroying WCW from the inside as the maniacal Svengali figure behind the nWo. Bischoff was revealed as the nWo's inside man on November 18, 1996, when Roddy Piper exposed him on Nitro. A power-hungry egomaniac, Bischoff facilitated the nWo's rise in secret while playing dumb on Nitro commentary. Whilst backstage, he was the mastermind and driving force behind the entire angle, generating a small fortune for WCW and making WWE pull their hair out in frustration with his Cheshire Cat smile and burning desire to karate kick Vince McMahon in the throat. Eazy-E was a slimy weasel who you just prayed would get his head flushed down a toilet on TV, but time and time again his goons would jump anyone who stepped to him, whilst Bischoff grinned and told the audience he loved them. The man was infuriatingly hateable, which is exactly what you want from a heel authority figure. Not everything Bischoff did was a home run. The motorcycle rallies in Sturgis were certainly odd, and the less we say about the fascistic overtones of nWo Sold Out 1997, the better. Plus the fact that it was rubbish. But when you remember the paid advertisements on Nitro, the weekly challenges to McMahon, and how angry you'd get when he'd fix things in the nWo's favor, you can't deny that Bischoff in the New World Order was box office. Level 1, the Immortals tier. These are the nWo. Not just important members, not just essential figures, but the very embodiment of what the faction represented. Without these four, there is no New World Order. They are wrestling immortals whose contributions to the nWo will be remembered as long as professional wrestling exists. Sting. Sting's relationship with the nWo is unlike anyone else's on this list. He spent nearly 2 years as their greatest enemy before eventually joining the Wolfpack on June 1, 1998. But his role in the faction's story is so integral, so defining, that he belongs at the very top of this list. Without Sting, the nWo is just another heel stable. With Sting, it became the greatest storyline in wrestling history. When the nWo used a fake Sting played by Jeff Farmer to frame the icon at Fall Brawl 1996, the real Sting was devastated that his WCW colleagues didn't trust him. So he delivered his free agent promo on September 16, 1996, and then transformed. Gone was the colorful, energetic Stinger. In his place stood a silent, brooding figure in black and white, inspired by the Crow, watching from the rafters. Sting's transformation into Crow Sting, first appearing in the trench coat and face paint on October 21, 1996, and making his first rafters appearance on October 28th, is one of wrestling's greatest character reinventions. For approximately 15 to 18 months, from Fall Brawl 1996 through Starrcade 1997, Sting didn't wrestle a single match. He just watched and waited, and occasionally descended from the ceiling to lay waste to nWo members with his baseball bat. The anticipation for Sting versus Hogan became unbearable. Every week, fans tuned in hoping this would be the night Sting finally got his hands on Hollywood. The silent warrior versus the loudmouth villain. WCW's franchise player versus the man who tried to destroy everything he loved. When that match finally happened at Starrcade 1997 on December 28th, the execution was botched, but the moment was still electric. Sting recaptured the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at Super Brawl 8 in February 1998, and as the nWo began to splinter, both factions fought for his allegiance. At Slamboree on May 17, 1998, Sting teamed with the Giant to defeat the Outsiders for the WCW World Tag Team Championship. But there was a problem. By this point, Giant had joined nWo Hollywood while Sting remained loyal to WCW. They were champions who hated each other. On June 1st, 1998, Sting finally made his choice between the two nWo factions. After a match where Hollywood Hogan and the Giant faced Kevin Nash and Lex Luger, Sting appeared wearing a black and white nWo shirt. The crowd's heart sank. Had their hero finally betrayed them? Then Sting tore off the shirt to reveal the red and black of the nWo Wolfpack underneath, and the place absolutely exploded. 2 weeks later at Great American Bash on June 14th, Sting defeated the Giant in a match to determine who would control both tag team title belts. Sting won and chose his new Wolfpack teammate Kevin Nash as his partner. Throughout the summer, Sting traded his black and white face paint for red and black and teamed with his best friend Lex Luger, while the Wolfpack feuded with Hogan and Hollywood. Sting joining the Wolfpack put them over the top as the most popular act in WCW. The red face paint allowed him to completely rebrand after the Crow era. But more importantly, Sting's journey from Silent Avenger to Wolfpack member represents the complete arc of the nWo story. He was their greatest enemy, their white whale, and ultimately, their biggest recruitment victory. Without Sting lurking in those rafters for 18 months, and without him finally choosing a side, the nWo saga is incomplete. He made the nWo matter in a way that no other member ever could. Scott Hall. It's no hyperbole to say that Scott Hall's arrival in WCW changed wrestling forever. When the former Razor Ramon appeared on that first 2-hour Nitro from Macon, Georgia, on May 27, 1996, emerging through the crowd and declaring war on WCW, audiences didn't know if he was still under Vince McMahon's employ or just a wild agent of chaos. "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." Those words changed everything. Suddenly, the line between reality and fiction was blurred. Was this an invasion? Was WWE actually sending guys to take over WCW? The uncertainty was intoxicating, and it was all centered around the magnetism of Hall and his best bud Kevin Nash, who arrived 2 weeks later. The weekly attacks leading up to Bash at the Beach, the infamous baseball bat attack at Disney that caused some viewers to legitimately call 911, it was chaos, and chaos was the order of the day. Hall made you believe anything could happen. The crowd surveyed the laid-back Hall. He was ridiculously over. If lesser performers than the Outsiders were in the same position, the nWo angle would have probably died instantly. But Hall had the charisma, the swagger, the effortless cool that made everything feel dangerous and exciting. The bad guy would never break through the glass ceiling in WCW. His personal substance abuse battles meant that WCW management could never trust him to run at the top of the card. But Hall was one of the faction's most successful members, with 2 US title runs, a TV title run, and 7 tag title runs with Nash, Syxx, and Giant, though Hall only tasted tag gold during the nWo's initial run. Scott Hall started the fire. Everything that followed, every t-shirt sold, every ratings point won, every moment that made the Monday Night Wars worth watching, it all traces back to that night in Macon when a man in a denim jacket told us he was here to take over. Hey yo. Kevin Nash, the worst drawing WWE champion ever. That tag must have stuck in Diesel's head because when he arrived in WCW on June 10th, 1996, 2 weeks after his best friend, he set out to become one of the biggest attractions in wrestling history. And he succeeded. Free from crap puns about trucks and horsepower, Nash was a West Coast rapper trapped inside a 7-foot-tall white guy's body, and fans couldn't get enough of Big Sexy. They hung on his every word and obeyed his orders to buy the shirt whenever he would hawk nWo gear on one of their infamous paid announcements. As cool and funny as Nash could be, though, he was often downright ruthless. If he wasn't throwing Rey Mysterio like a lawn dart, he was running the Steiners off the road, baseball batting schmucks, or powerbombing people through tables. And it was all too sweet. Despite Hogan being front and center, Nash and Hall were just as important to the group as the Hulkster, and if anything, they did more to enhance the nWo's reputation whilst Hogan hung out with Brother Broody and Virgil. Nash brought the cool factor that Hogan simply couldn't provide. He was the nWo member that young fans actually wanted to be. Eventually, Nash got sick of the direction Bischoff and Hogan were taking the nWo, splitting off and forming the immensely popular Wolfpack before booking himself to win the WCW title and end Goldberg's streak, and ultimately orchestrating the finger poke of doom. For better or worse, Big Sexy shaped WCW's destiny, and his fingerprints are all over the nWo's legacy. Hollywood Hogan. For all that Hulk Hogan deservedly gets criticized for his behavior in and out of the ring, even his biggest detractor can't deny how huge and utterly shocking it was when he dropped those famous leg drops on Randy Savage at Bash at the Beach 1996 on July 7th at the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach, Florida. Hall made his theatrical 3 count while Hogan posed, and suddenly, the most beloved babyface in wrestling history was a villain. The debris rained down. The crowd threw trash at their former hero, and Hollywood Hogan was born. The nWo breathed new life into Hogan, who chewed the scenery week after week and was a total bastard, spray painting people's backs and belts, spitting on downed opponents, and being such a so-and-so that a literal shower of debris greeted him every time he got in the ring. The fans who once loved him now despised him with equal passion. Whilst Hollywood wasn't nearly as cool as Nash, Hall, Conan, and so on, he was still a magnetic presence and, as a genuine household name, turned WCW into the powerhouse it was. His star power legitimized the nWo in a way that no one else could. When Hulk Hogan joins your faction, it's not a group of rebels anymore. It's a genuine threat to the entire company. In the ring, he was dominant, of course, holding the WCW World Heavyweight Championship for a combined total of approximately 646 days during the nWo era alone, the longest combined total in WCW history across all his reigns. Whilst the nWo was fresh with Hogan and the nWo's feud with Sting, it was one of the hottest angles in wrestling history. Hogan's matches during this time were seldom good, and the ego trips became more bloated than his 24-inch pythons. But when his nWo theme proclaimed Hogan as the biggest icon in professional wrestling, it wasn't wrong. Love him or hate him, Hollywood Hogan was the nWo. The stable's success and eventual bloat can both be traced back to him. He was the third man, and wrestling was never the same. Like and subscribe for more hard-hitting WCW documentaries. Until next time.